Farm bankruptcies are up 55% in 2025 and children are surviving on just $6 a day for food. In a packed congressional hearing broadcast nationwide, Jasmine Crockett stares down Donald Trump as America holds its breath. The stakes: hungry kids, collapsing farms, and deadly diseases returning after 20 years. Millions are watching, but the real question: what explosive twist is Jasmine about to reveal that even Trump can't escape? Stay with us. This is a story worth every second of your time. The Capitol trembled under the weight of anticipation. Spotlights glared down on polished marble floors, microphones hissed with static, and the words "National Emergency Hearing" live flashed across every screen in America. From dusty diners in Kansas to crowded apartments in Brooklyn, families leaned forward, eyes fixed. They weren't watching politics, they were watching survival itself. Inside the chamber, the atmosphere was electric, charged like a storm about to break. Republicans lounged in their seats with smug grins, whispering to each other as though today was already theirs. Democrats sat rigid, eyes sharp, knowing the battle ahead would be merciless. At the center, Donald Trump leaned back in his chair, arms folded, lips curled into a smirk that reeked of defiance. The cameras loved him, but tonight, the cameras were waiting for her. The doors swung open. Jasmine Crockett entered not like a politician, but like a soldier stepping onto a battlefield. Her heels struck the floor with deliberate rhythm, echoing through the chamber like drumbeats of war. In one hand she carried a thick folder marked with bold red tabs: farm bankruptcies, SNAP cuts, health crisis, outbreaks. In the other, she carried the weight of millions of forgotten Americans. The room shifted, silence spread like wildfire. The narrator's voice pierced the tension, every word like a knife. Farm bankruptcies up 55%. Children surviving on $6 a day, the first measles outbreak in 20 years. Tonight truth collides with power in front of 330 million Americans. Gasps rippled through the gallery, where farmers with calloused hands sat beside mothers clutching photos of hungry children. These were not statistics, they were lives. And they were watching Jasmine. She took her seat directly across from Trump, her eyes locked for the first time, a collision of fire and ice. Trump's smirk deepened, daring her to speak, daring her to fail. Around him, allies chuckled, whispering insults, confident this would be just another circus they could control. But Jasmine didn't flinch. She placed her folder on the table with a deliberate thud. The microphones picked it up like a hammer on steel. The sound cut through the chamber, through televisions, through hearts across the country. Reporters scribbled furiously, cameras zoomed in tight, sweat glistened on foreheads. For a brief, fragile second, the air itself seemed to stop moving. This wasn't just a hearing, it was a trial. The trial of truth against lies, the trial of a nation against its own betrayal. And Jasmine Crockett alone, unshaken, was about to open her case. She inhaled, steady but fierce, her eyes burning not just at Trump but through him. Every viewer at home felt it, the sensation that history itself was about to split wide open. A hush gripped the chamber, and in that silence, a single thought echoed across America. Is this the night the truth finally breaks? The man who built his empire on lies. The silence broke with Jasmine's voice, sharp and unyielding, slicing through the chamber like steel. Farm bankruptcies are up 55% in just 1 year. 55%, Mr. Trump, that's not a talking point, that's devastation. That's families losing the land their grandfathers plowed, children watching tractors hauled away by banks. She leaned forward, her hand striking the folder, and the sound echoed like a gavel sealing a fate. The chamber stirred uneasily, reporters scribbling, cameras zooming, the weight of her accusation settling over the room. Trump smirked, leaned into his microphone, and fired back with that familiar, mocking drawl: fake news, fake numbers. More Democrat lies to scare America. A few Republicans chuckled, their laughter bouncing around the chamber like cruel echoes. But the reaction was not what Trump expected. The gallery gasped, a collective intake of breath as if the nation itself recoiled. On the screen, the chyron flashed in bold. USDA report confirms 55% surge, and suddenly, Trump's words rang hollow. Before anyone could move, a figure rose in the gallery. A farmer, his clothes worn, hands trembling, clutched a faded photograph. His voice cracked as he called out, "This is my land. My family's land. It's gone. Because of you." Security shifted nervously, but Jasmine lifted her hand to stop them, her eyes locked on the man. He held up the photo rows of cornfields under a wide sky, now nothing more than a memory swallowed by foreclosure. The chamber froze. Viewers across America felt the tremor in his voice, the human cost behind Jasmine's numbers. Trump's face darkened. He shifted in his chair, defensive now, lashing out. Another actor, another Democrat stunt. You people think you can parade sob stories. His words were cut short by Jasmine slamming the report onto the table. Pages fanned out, charts and graphs lit under the cameras. Sob stories, she thundered. These are your people. These are Americans. Your tariffs crushed their markets, your greed strangled their harvests, and your arrogance is burying their future. The fury in her voice shook the chamber, but behind it was grief, raw and uncheckable. The farmer's voice cracked again, softer this time. My son asked me why we don't have milk anymore. I didn't know how to answer him. The silence that followed was unbearable. For a moment, even Trump said nothing, his lips pressed tight, his eyes darting away from the farmer's tear-streaked face. The weight of the man's testimony sank into every corner of the chamber, pulling at the hearts of viewers watching from their kitchens, living rooms, and phones. Jasmine's tone shifted, softer but sharper than a knife. This isn't fake, Mr. Trump. This is America. And America is watching. She let the silence linger, her words hanging in the air like a verdict no one could escape. Reporters capture every second. Anchors whispered in stunned tones, and hashtags began to erupt online. And as the farmer sat down, clutching his photo like a lifeline, the nation braced itself because this was only the first strike. The battle had just begun, and the next blow would cut even deeper. The sound of paper slamming against polished wood cracked through the chamber like a gunshot. Jasmine's hand pressed firmly on the stack of USDA reports, her voice cutting through the tense air. This is not Democrat data. This is not my opinion. This is your government's data. She shoved the top page forward. Charts and tables sprawled across the table under the glare of the cameras, undeniable in their authority. Reporters craned their necks, zoom lenses clicked furiously, every word etched into headlines that were already writing themselves. Trump blinked, his smirk faltering. For the first time that night, his body stiffened in the chair. The room seemed to lean in closer, as though the walls themselves were holding their breath. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but no words came. The cameras caught it, all the narrowing eyes, the twitch in his jaw, the hesitation that screamed louder than any insult he'd ever hurled. Gasps rippled across the gallery, silence spread like wildfire, swallowing even the whispers. Jasmine didn't stop, she pushed another page forward, jabbing her finger at the red ink. 55% more bankruptcies. These are farmers you promised to protect, farmers whose trust you abused. You said you'd save them. Instead, you sold them lies and tariffs that bled them dry. Her voice cracked with fury, but beneath it was something sharper, sorrow, the sorrow of a nation watching its backbone collapse. On the big screens broadcasting live, the words 55% surge, USDA confirms glared in bold. The evidence was undeniable, and for once, Donald Trump had no script. The seconds dragged, 10, 15, 20. Trump's fingers tapped nervously against the desk, his eyes darting between Jasmine's piercing stare and the damning charts in front of him. The crowd sensed weakness, murmurs rose, anticipation building like a drumroll. At 25 seconds, a journalist's pen fell to the floor with a clatter, the sound echoing through the chamber, magnifying the unbearable silence. At 35 seconds, even his allies shifted in their seats, glancing at one another, wondering why he wasn't fighting back. 47 seconds. That's how long Donald Trump sat in silence, frozen, stripped bare before the nation. To viewers at home, it felt like an eternity, like time itself had stopped to witness the collapse of arrogance under the weight of truth. Social media lit up instantly. Hashtag for 7 seconds trended. Hashtags exploded. Memes flooded the internet. Millions of Americans leaned closer to their screens, whispering, "He has no answer." Jasmine leaned back slowly, her eyes never leaving his. Her voice dropped to a near whisper, but the microphone carried it like thunder. "If this is how he answers on farms, what happens when I turn to the children?" The chamber erupted, half in applause, half in chaos. Trump finally stirred, slamming his fist on the desk, red-faced, ready to lash out. But it was too late. The silence had spoken louder than anything he could say, and as the hearing descended into shouts and flashes of cameras, the nation braced itself for the next, even deadlier confrontation. The echoes of Trump's 47 seconds of silence still hung in the chamber when Jasmine leaned forward again, her voice quieter now, but sharper than any shout. "You couldn't answer for the farmers, Mr. Trump. Let's see if you can answer for the children." She slid a fresh sheet across the table. The number circled in red like a wound. $6. The cameras zoomed in, networks flashing the figure on every screen across America. Jasmine's tone cut like glass. $6, that's what a child in America has to survive on per day under your policies. Gasps rippled through the audience. A mother in the gallery clutched her chest, her snap card trembling in her hand as though it might shatter. Security glanced toward her, but Jasmine raised a hand, giving her the floor. The woman's voice cracked as she spoke into the stunned silence. $6, do you know what $6 buys? A gallon of milk, maybe a loaf of bread. Some nights, I skip meals so my son can eat at school. Her voice broke, her hands shaking as she held up a photograph of a boy, thin, smiling faintly, unaware his next meal depended on the kindness of cafeteria workers. The chamber was stone-cold silent, the weight of her testimony pressing on every soul present. Trump leaned back, his smirk returning, but weaker now, as though plastered over cracks of unease. He muttered into the mic, "More Democrat sob stories." The words fell flat, hitting the marble like stones dropped into a bottomless well. The mother gasped audibly, tears streaking down her face, and the chamber erupted in boos and angry shouts. Jasmine's eyes blazed, she slammed her palm on the table, the sound ricocheting off the walls. "Sob stories, these are children. This is America starving under your watch, and you call it a story?" The fury in her voice seared through every camera, into every living room, igniting anger across the nation. The mother gripped her snap card like it was her last weapon. "I don't need stories. I need food for my child," she sobbed, collapsing back into her seat. Reporters' pens scratched frantically, capturing every tear, every syllable, knowing this moment would headline tomorrow's papers. The chamber vibrated with emotion, despair from the gallery, fury from Jasmine, and a known silence from Trump. Even his allies shifted uncomfortably, their smirks fading as the cameras captured their unease. Jasmine's voice steadied, colder now, a blade drawn slow and deliberate. $6 a day, Mr. Trump, would you feed your grandchildren on that? The question hung in the air, heavy and unanswerable, striking deeper than any insult could. Trump opened his mouth, but nothing came. His eyes darted, his jaw tightened, the silence damning him once again. Hashtags exploded across social media, hashtag $6, hashtag hungry children. America was watching not just a hearing, but a reckoning. Jasmine leaned closer, lowering her voice until it became intimate, almost conspiratorial with the cameras. "You failed the farmers. Now, you are failing the children, and if America's children can't eat, what does that say about the soul of this nation?" The chamber pulsed with unease, the audience leaning forward, hearts pounding. And as her words faded into silence, the question loomed, searing itself into the minds of millions. If this is how he answers hunger, how will he answer disease? The chamber still buzzed with the raw testimony of the mother clutching her snap card when Trump leaned forward, microphone crackling as he forced his voice over the silence. "This is what Democrats want: dependency. They want people weak, waiting for handouts, crying in front of cameras so they can score political points." He sneered, letting his words drip with contempt, eyes darting to the gallery where the woman sat shaking. He sneered, letting his words drip with contempt, eyes darting to the gallery where the woman sat shaking. "Real Americans work. They don't beg." His allies chuckled, the laughter sharp, cutting through the already tense air like broken glass. The room convulsed with anger. Gasps erupted, reporters lifted their heads in disbelief, and the mother buried her face in her hands, shoulders trembling. Jasmine's eyes flared like fire catching wind. She pushed herself up from her chair, palm slamming against the table, her voice exploding across the chamber. "Dependency or survival?" The force of her words made the microphone screech, the sound rattling through speakers across every household in America. The gallery erupted cheers, cries, applause that drowned out even the pounding gavel of the chair calling for order. Trump leaned back, smirk widening as if her fury was fuel. "Survival, don't make me laugh. $6 a day, That's your idea of survival? He waved his hand dismissively, gesturing toward the gallery as though the pain in those seats was theater. Nothing more. You people exaggerate everything. America was stronger under me. The weak only got weaker because Democrats taught them to stay weak. His words rang cruel, cutting deep, but this time the cruelty landed wrong. Even through the TV screens, viewers recoiled. The image of the trembling mother lingered like a wound, making Trump's callousness look monstrous. Jasmine's chest heaved as she pointed directly at him, her fingers shaking not with fear but with righteous fury. You dare mock a mother who skips meals so her son can eat. You dare call hungry children weak. This isn't about dependency, Mr. Trump, it's about dignity. It's about the basic right to survive. Her voice cracked with passion, half fury, half grief, the raw truth of lived experience carried in every syllable. The chamber erupted again, Democrats rising to their feet, clapping, shouting in solidarity. While Republicans shouted back, the space transforming into a storm of voices clashing like thunder. The chair pounded the gavel furiously, calling for order, but the chaos only built, cameras capturing every grimace, every cheer, every tear. Trump tried to shout over the noise, voice hoarse, spitting the same refrain. Weak, lazy, dependent. But the more he shouted, the more he sounded unhinged, his words bouncing back on him like ricocheting bullets. Jasmine waited, letting him burn himself out, her gaze steady, eyes locked on him like a predator waiting for the moment to strike. Finally, she raised her voice above the storm, her words crisp, slicing through the clamor. This chamber isn't erupting because of politics. It's erupting because Americans are watching their children starve while you laugh. Survival isn't weakness, it's the fight to stay alive. And the people you dismiss as weak are the people holding this country together. The nose fell into a sudden hush, her words ringing in the stillness, echoing into every living room across the nation. And then came the eruption, not from politicians, but from the gallery, ordinary Americans chanting through tears and fury. Survival. Survival. Survival, as the cameras broadcast the chant into history. The chant of survival, survival, still echoed from the gallery when Jasmine raised her hand, silencing the roar like a conductor commanding an orchestra. Her voice, steadier now but laced with steel, cut through the chamber. This is not about party lines. This is not Republican or Democrat. This is about America's children. Hunger is not a political issue, it is a moral crisis. The words rang out, forcing even the most hardened lawmakers to sit back, their smirks fading under the weight of undeniable truth. She lifted a photograph from her folder and held it high for the cameras. It was not statistics, not charts, but the face of a boy no older than 7, sitting alone in a school cafeteria. His tray carried a single apple, a carton of milk, and a sandwich so small it looked like a joke. Jasmine's voice softened, her anger folding into grief. For millions of children, this is their only meal of the day. This is what $6 looks like. This is what policy looks like when it fails the people it swore to protect. The image filled screens across America, burning itself into memory. Trump scoffed, trying to wave it off. Propaganda. Democrats love sad pictures. They should tell their parents to work harder. His words splattered like acid, but this time they only deepened the silence. Reporters didn't write, they stared. Cameras zoomed tighter on Jasmine, ignoring him, because the nation had already chosen which image would define the night. Jasmine stepped closer to the microphone, leaning forward as though speaking directly into the hearts of the families watching from their living rooms. This boy isn't a statistic, he's your neighbor's child. He's the kid sitting next to yours in NAV class, and every day, he waits for the school bell not because he loves learning, but because he knows that when it rings, he'll finally get to eat. Her voice trembled, carrying not weakness but raw humanity. The gallery fell into tears, parents holding each other, farmers bowing their heads. Then she turned, eyes narrowing back on Trump, her tone sharpening like a blade pulled from its sheath. You call this dependency, I call it survival. You call this weakness, I call it America on its knees because of you. The words hit with the force of a hammer, the rhythm of truth building into another crescendo. The chamber erupted again, Democrats rising to their feet, shouts colliding with boos, the chaos of a nation tearing itself open on live television. And yet, Jasmine did not shout. She let the storm swirl, then spoke into it, calm but deadly serious. Hunger is the most basic test of our humanity. fail it, and everything else collapses. Because if we can't feed our children, tell me." She paused, her eyes piercing the cameras, holding the silence like a knife over the throat of the moment. If hunger is ignored, what about health itself? The chamber fell quiet again, the cliffhanger hanging heavy in the air. Millions leaned forward in their homes, already knowing the next battle would strike even deeper. The war over food had been brutal. The war over health was about to explode. The chamber still vibrated with Jasmine's last words when she reached into her folder again, this time pulling out something heavier, darker, a dossier stamped with the insignia of the Department of Health and Human Services. Her eyes swept the room, then locked on Trump, her voice dropped, calm but lethal. "You think hunger is the end of the story? It isn't, because when children go hungry, their bodies weaken. And now, because of your cuts, because of your reckless dismantling of our health protections, America faces something we thought we had buried decades ago." She held up the report, then turned to the cameras. "Measles, the first outbreak in 20 years. And children are dying." Gas sliced through the chamber like knives. Screens across the nation flickered to breaking footage. Emergency rooms in Texas overflowing, children with rashes and fevers, their tiny bodies trembling under thin blankets. Parents wept in waiting rooms, faces twisted in fear, whispering prayers as doctors rushed past with stretchers. Anka's voices cracked as they repeated the words, "Children dead, outbreak confirmed." The gallery erupted in chaos. Mothers clutched their children tighter, lawmakers shouted over one another, and reporters bolted for their phones to blast the news. Trump shifted in his seat, shaking his head, muttering hoax, fear-mongering, but the images on the screens drowned him out. The sight of a sobbing father holding the lifeless hand of his daughter in a Texas hospital made his denial look grotesque. Viewers at home clutched their own children, hearts pounding, fear crawling into their living rooms. Jasmine's voice rose above the storm, her tone trembling with rage. For 20 years, parents never had to fear measles. For 20 years, vaccines kept our children safe. But you tore down the very teams built to protect them. You silenced experts. You slashed health programs. And now, coffins are being lowered into the ground. She slammed her fist on the desk, and the sound reverberated like thunder. Trump leaned into the mic, face red, eyes darting wildly. "Lies. Exaggerations. We handled this perfectly. It's under control." His words stumbled, each one weaker than the last. The chamber hissed with disbelief, jeers rising from the gallery. The footage behind him, ambulances lined outside hospitals, grieving mothers collapsing into nurses' arms, made his defense look like madness. Jasmine leaned forward, her voice cutting sharp, each word deliberate. "Tell America is fake while they bury their children. Tell Texas is under control while they dig graves. Tell these mothers their tears are exaggerations." Her hand pointed toward the gallery, where the single mother from earlier now sobbed uncontrollably, covering her face as cameras zoomed in. The chamber fell into a horrified silence, the sound of her crying carrying through the microphones like a dirge. Across America, millions stared at their screens, shaken, afraid, trembling with the same thought. If measles has returned, what comes next? The horror of the measles footage still gripped the chamber when Trump finally lurched forward, pounding his fist against the desk. His voice boomed, desperate, rising above the gasps. "This is not my fault. These outbreaks come from the border illegals flooding our country, bringing their diseases with them." He jabbed a finger toward the cameras, shouting so loud the microphone screeched. "Blame them, not me. I was the only one strong enough to fight it." The words detonated across the chamber like an explosion. Gasps tore from the gallery, reporters shouted in disbelief, and a few Republicans clapped half-heartedly, their applause drowned by jeers and boos. Mothers in the audience clutched their children tighter, one standing up and crying out, "How dare you blame them? My baby was born here." The camera swung wildly, capturing every tear-streaked face, every furious glare. Trump leaned back, satisfied with his deflection, but the tremor in his hands betrayed him. Jasmine shot up from her chair, her voice thundering with righteous rage. "Do not dare twist this into xenophobia. It wasn't immigrants who dismantled our health response teams, it was you." She pointed directly at him, finger quivering with fury. "It was your administration that gutted the CDC task forces, your allies who silenced scientists, Your cuts that left our hospitals defenseless. Don't you dare point the finger at the powerless when it was you who lit the fire. The chamber roared, gasps colliding with applause, the emotional pitch spiking like lightning striking steel. Trump tried to interrupt, waving his hands, barking into the microphone. Wrong. Totally wrong. Fake numbers, fake scientists, all fake. But his shout sounded brittle, desperate, a man drowning in the chaos he created. Jasmine pressed harder, her voice now steady but burning with contempt. You call it fake while children die in Texas hospitals. You call it fake while parents bury their kids. Do you know what fake is, Mr. Trump? Fake is standing here pretending you care about Americans while cutting the very programs that could have saved them. She slammed her palm down again, the microphones booming, and the room quaked with the force of her words. The audience was on its feet now, mothers screaming, farmers clapping, reporters shouting over one another, the chamber spinning into controlled chaos. But Jasmine's voice rose above it all, a blade slicing through the storm. You didn't protect America, you disarmed it. And now we are paying the price in children's lives. The cameras cut to Trump, his face pale beneath the orange glow of the lights, his jaw tight, sweat gleaming at his temples. For the first time, the bravado cracked, replaced by a flash of something he could never admit: fear. The gallery gasped as the realization spread like a wave. Jasmine Crockett had cornered him, and the world had just witnessed it live. The chamber was still vibrating with Jasmine's last strike when she turned sharply toward the witness table. Her eyes locked on Dr. Frank, the senior health official sitting stiffly under the glare of the cameras. She lifted another folder, flipping it open with precision, and pulled out a single slide blown up onto the monitors for everyone to see. The words screamed in bold: clusters of non-immunization foster outbreaks of vaccine-preventable diseases, including measles. The gallery gasped, reporters nearly leaping out of their seats. Jasmine's voice cracked like a whip. Dr. Frank, did you write this? Frank adjusted his glasses, sweat forming on his brow. I don't recall the specifics of that presentation. His voice wavered, thin as paper. Jasmine slammed the desk, the sound booming across the chamber like thunder. Don't play games with me. This was your own research, presented at the University of North Texas in 2021. You warned us. You pulled the truth, then suddenly, silence. Why? Dr. Frank, who muzzled you? The camera zoomed in on his trembling face. Frank opened his mouth, glanced toward Trump, then quickly lowered his eyes. The hesitation told the story before he could. Murmurs spread like wildfire across the chamber, a low rumble of disbelief and fury. Jasmine leaned closer, her voice cutting sharp. Say it. Did Trump's anti-vax rhetoric silence you? Did his administration force you to bury science while children paid the price? Frank stammered, his hands shaking on the microphone. I was instructed to align messaging with the secretary. The words barely escaped his lips, but the effect was seismic. Gasps ripped through the gallery, reporters shouted over one another, and Trump's allies shifted uncomfortably, their faces pale under the spotlight. Jasmine pounced, her voice a roar of fire. So you admit it, science was silenced, experts were gagged. Children are dying not because we didn't know better but because this administration chose lies over life. Trump slammed his fist on the desk, shouting, lies. He's twisting words, don't believe this charade. But the cameras ignored him, staying locked on Frank's broken expression, the living proof of betrayal. The audience leaned forward, breathless, as Jasmine delivered the strike that landed like a verdict. You betrayed your oath to protect public health. And you, Mr. Trump, turned America into a graveyard of preventable deaths. The chamber shook with fury, some lawmakers pounding the tables, others yelling over one another. In living rooms across the nation, parents clutched their children, horror mixing with rage. And then Jasmine's voice dropped low, cutting through the noise with chilling calm. If health itself is collapsing under your assault, what happens when research, the very pursuit of truth, is attacked next? The words hung in the air, a cliffhanger heavy as a storm cloud, as America braced for the next revelation. The chamber still throbbed with the aftershock of Dr. Frank's confession when Jasmine rose again, her folder snapping open like the blade of a sword. She pulled out another stack of documents, this one stamped NIH, and held it high out under the lights. Her voice, sharp and relentless, cut across the room. It wasn't just children you failed, Mr. Trump. It was science itself. You slashed funding for Alzheimer's, cancer, diabetes, women's health research that could have saved millions of lives. You gutted our future for the sake of your politics. Gasps rippled through the gallery, and reporters, and scratched feverishly as graphs and numbers flashed on the monitors. Trump leaned back, smirk curling across his face, his arrogance returning like a mask to cover the cracks of fear. Into the microphone, he drawled, "Woke research. That's all it is, a waste of money on fake problems. Under me, we cut the fat." His words oozed with contempt, but the chamber recoiled as though he had spat poison. A woman in the gallery shot to her feet, voice shaking with rage. "My mother is dying of Alzheimer's. Was she woke?" Her cry cracked through the silence, raw and searing, and suddenly the numbers Jasmine held weren't just numbers anymore, they were human lives. Jasmine's eyes flared, and she seized the moment. Woke? Tell that to the families watching their loved ones disappear into dementia. Tell that to the woman fighting breast cancer who now waits longer for treatment because you gutted the grants that funded her care. Tell that to the millions of Americans who believed their government would invest in life, not strip it away for political theater. Her voice thundered, fury and sorrow colliding into a crescendo that rattled the chamber. Trump scoffed, rolling his eyes, trying to laugh it off. But the sound was hollow, brittle, the smirk failing to mask the unease that crept across his face. Jasmine pressed harder, her voice dropping to a whisper that cut sharper than any shout. You didn't just cut budgets, you cut hope, you cut futures. You cut the chance for a cure, for survival, for tomorrow. The chamber erupted again, Democrats slamming their fists in outrage, Republicans shouting back, the gallery divided between tears and fury. Reporters shouted over each other, their voices filling the air with chaos. Yet amid the storm, Jasmine stood unwavering, her hand still clutching the NIH reports like evidence in a trial. She turned toward the cameras, her eyes piercing into living rooms across the nation. Science is not woke, science is life. And this administration chose to wage war on it. The words detonated like an explosion, the echo reverberating far beyond the chamber walls, into the conscience of a country watching in disbelief. The chamber had barely settled from Jasmine's blistering attack on NIH cuts when she reached for another folder, its edges marked with the crest of America's top universities. She held it high, her voice cutting with precision. It wasn't enough for you to gut medical research, Mr. Trump. You went further. You targeted the very places where discovery is born, our universities. You shut down labs, stripped grants, silenced professors, and called it victory. The words cracked across the chamber, igniting murmurs of disbelief as screens lit up with footage of shuttered research facilities and darkened laboratories. Trump leaned forward, sneering into the microphone. Universities, nothing but indoctrination factories. They don't produce cures, they produce radicals. Why should hardworking Americans pay for their nonsense? His allies chuckled, nodding, but their laughter fell flat against the heavy silence from the gallery. All eyes turned as a young woman stepped forward, trembling but resolute, clutching a small folder of her own. She was barely out of graduate school, her badge reading diabetes research fellow. Her voice quivered, but her words carried the force of heartbreak. I was on the verge of a breakthrough. We had identified markers that could change the way we treat type 1 diabetes. But then our funding vanished, the lab closed. The patients waiting for hope were told to wait longer, maybe forever. She lifted a photograph of her younger brother, barely a teenager, his arm marked by insulin injection scars. Her voice cracked. He asks me every day if I'll find a cure in time. And now, because of your cuts, I have to tell him I don't know anymore. The gallery gasped, mothers covered their mouths, and even hardened lawmakers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The girl's tears glistened under the harsh lights, her pain undeniable, her testimony unforgettable. Jasmine stepped closer, placing a steady hand on the young researcher's shoulder. Her own voice trembled with empathy but sharpened quickly into steel. This is not indoctrination, Mr. Trump. This is not nonsense. This is science. This is life. And you killed it because you feared what you couldn't control. Trump barked back, red-faced. They wasted money. They lie. They never deliver results. His words rang hollow, brittle against the sobbing testimony that had just carved itself into the heart of the nation. Jasmine leaned into her microphone, eyes never leaving his. Results? Look at her brother. Look at the millions of Americans suffering. The only result your policies produced was despair. The chamber erupted once more, outrage and grief colliding into a storm. The young researcher buried her face in her hands, Jasmine's arms steady around her shoulders, while cameras captured the tableau of betrayal and broken dreams. Across America, families living with diabetes stared at their screens in silence, feeling the same hollow ache. And Jasmine's words lingered, a verdict echoing in every home. You didn't just shut down labs, you shut down hope. The young researcher's trembling testimony still echo in the chamber when Jasmine straightened, her eyes blazing, her voice slicing through the nose with deadly clarity. This is bigger than one lab, bigger than one disease. This is about power. These cuts weren't accidents, they were calculated. Every shuttered lab, every silent scientist, every broken grant leads back to one thing: corporate greed and political control. The words landed heavy, shifting the room from sorrow to outrage. Screens lit up with images of pharmaceutical lobbyists shaking hands with lawmakers, contracts signed in shadowed backrooms, profits soaring while patients wasted away. Trump leaned back, smirking, his arms folded as though he'd heard it all before. Greed, please, that's capitalism. That's how America wins. He shrugged, eyes sweeping across the room with mocking disdain. Universities don't create winners. Corporations do. I chose the winners. His arrogance dripped like oil, thick and slick, but Jasmine pounced before his smirk could settle. Winners, she thundered, her fists striking the table so hard the microphones rattled. The only winners here are CEOs counting blood money while Americans bury their mothers, their fathers, their children. You didn't invest in cures, you invested in control. You gagged scientists, you funneled funds to your allies, and you left this nation bleeding. The chamber erupted, voices colliding like waves in a storm, fury spilling from the gallery as the young researcher's quiet sobs punctuated every word. The monitors behind her switched again, this time showing graphs, soaring corporate profits against collapsing public research budgets. Side by side, the numbers told a story too brutal to ignore. Jasmine pointed, her voice trembling with both grief and rage. This is not fiscal policy, this is theft. This is the robbery of knowledge itself, and when knowledge is stolen, when truth is buried, who benefits? Not the people, not the sick, only those who fear what discovery might reveal. Gasps tore from the audience, one farmer shouting from the gallery, "My wife could have been saved if they'd found that cure." His cry echoed across the chamber, human testimony slamming into cold numbers. Trump rolled his eyes, muttering into the mic, "Sad stories, always the same sad stories." The cruelty in his dismissal only magnified the outrage. Jasmine leaned forward, her tone shifting from fury to something darker, an almost whispered warning that gripped the chamber by the throat. What happens when knowledge itself is silenced? When truth is gagged? When discovery is strangled? When scientists are told to shut up or starve? That's not just betrayal, it's the slow death of a nation. Her words fell heavy, reverberating into the stunned silence that followed. She turned to the cameras, her eyes burning straight into the living rooms of millions of viewers. Is America still the land of innovation, or has it already become the land of ignorance? The cliffhanger question struck like lightning, leaving the chamber stunned and the audience at home breathless, knowing the fight was far from over. The echo of Jasmine's cliffhanger still lingered when the chair recognized the next witnesses, ordinary Americans whose stories would cut deeper than any statistic. A veteran in uniform, medals pinned to his chest, stepped forward with a limp that spoke louder than words. His voice was gravel, worn down by years of service. "I fought in Iraq, I bled for this country, and now I can't even get the medication to control my seizures because my healthcare was slashed." He pulled a trembling bottle of half-empty pills from his pocket, holding it up for the chamber to see. "This is all I have left. When it's gone, I don't know what will happen." The gallery fell silent, tears pooling in the eyes of strangers who rose instinctively to their feet. Jasmine leaned forward, her voice thick with emotion. "You gave your body for this nation, and this is how they repay you: with cuts, with neglect, with abandonment." Her words echoed, heavy with sorrow, binding his pain to the conscience of millions watching at home. Trump rolled his eyes, muttering another sad story, but his voice was drowned by gasps and boos from the crowd. Then a mother wheeled her daughter to the witness table, a little girl no older than 10 strapped to a chair, her legs unmoving. The mother's voice shook as she held her daughter's hand. "She has cerebral palsy. School therapy was her lifeline speech, physical therapy, everything. But the funding is gone. They told me to find private care. Do you know what private care costs? More than my entire salary. So now she sits at home, losing the progress she fought for every single day. The girl looked down, clutching a stuffed bear, her silence louder than any scream. Reporters wiped their eyes, cameras zooming in close, every frame dripping with tragedy. Jasmine rose slowly, fury mingling with empathy. This is what policy looks like in real life. It looks like a veteran rationing his pills. It looks like a child denied therapy because the government decided her life was too expensive. These aren't isolated tragedies, they are the legacy of your cuts, Mr. Trump. The words rang like a bell tolling at a funeral. The chamber was a storm of grief and anger, now mothers weeping, veterans clapping in solidarity, lawmakers shouting over one another. Yet in the middle of the chaos, Jasmine's woe steadied again, soft but searing. How many more stories must we hear before America admits the truth? How many more lives must crumble before survival is no longer partisan? Her question lingered, pulling viewers deeper into sorrow and fury, knowing the worst revelations were still to come. The veterans' trembling hands and the little girl's silent stare still haunted the chamber when Jasmine rose again, her face pale with rage, her voice carrying the weight of a verdict. She pointed across the table, fingers shaking not with fear but with fury. Let's be clear, they don't hate me, they don't hate Democrats. They hate America's children. The words detonated like dynamite, the echo reverberating off marble walls, ricocheting into the gallery, and piercing through every television screen across the nation. For a heartbeat, the chamber froze. Then Democrats erupted to their feet, a tidal wave of applause and shouts, pounding their fists on the desks in thunderous rhythm. Reporters scrambled to capture the moment, cameras snapping frantically, while the gallery burst into cheers, tears, and cries of yes, yes. But on the other side, Republicans sprang up, shouting insults, fists pounding the air, their voices clashing against the ovation like steel against steel. The chamber was no longer a room, it was a battlefield. Trump's face darkened, his jaw clenched, his knuckles white against the table. He tried to bark into the mic, outrageous, lying witch, disgraceful, but his words drowned in the chaos. Jasmine stood firm, unmoved, her presence towering over the storm. Her voice cut through like a blade, louder than the gavel pounding for order. This administration cut healthcare for veterans, therapy for disabled children, meals for the hungry, vaccines for the vulnerable. These aren't just policies, they are attacks. Attacks on the most defenseless among us. The chamber surged with noise, rising and crashing like waves. Democrats chanted her name. Republicans shouted back. The gallery split between cheers and jeers. Yet Jasmine's voice never wavered, her eyes locked on Trump as if no one else existed. You mock the suffering, you sneer at their pain, and you dare call yourself a leader. No leader who hates children, no leader who destroys families, no leader who silences science has any claim to America. The ovation reached a fever pitch, the sound shaking the chamber like an earthquake. Republicans shouted for order, but their voices were drowned beneath the roar. Trump leaned back in his chair, red-faced, sweating, shouting insults no one could hear anymore. And in that storm of fury and applause, Jasmine stood unshaken, her words hanging over the chaos like thunder. If you hate America's children, then you hate America itself. The chamber roared, the nation gasped, and the battle raged on, more ferocious than ever. The chamber was still trembling with Jasmine's fiery declaration when Trump suddenly lunged forward, slamming both fists onto the desk. His face burned crimson, sweat dripping under the harsh lights, eyes wild with fury. His voice cracked through the chamber like a cannon. You hate America. You hate everything it stands for. You and your party want to destroy this country from the inside out. The words spat from his mouth like venom, his body shaking as he pointed furiously toward Jasmine. The chamber erupted, Republicans leaping to their feet, pounding their fists on tables in rhythm with his rage. Traitor, an American, they howled, their voices colliding into a deafening chorus. Democrats shouted back, waving their arms, chanting Jasmine's name. The gallery was chaos, half screaming in anger, half in tears. The gavel slammed again and again, but order was long gone. Trump's voice strained louder, desperate to drown out everything else. But Jasmine did not move. She waited until his voice cracked, until the venom turned into nose, until his fury lost its edge. Then, in one sharp motion, she rose to her feet and pointed directly at him, her fingers steady, her eyes locked on his with an intensity that froze even the shouting lawmakers. Her voice cut through the bedlam like a blade of ice. "No, you betrayed America." The words hit like a thunderclap, the chamber gasped, the nose collapsing into a stunned silence. Even the cameras seemed to zoom tighter, holding on to that moment, capturing the duel in close-up. Trump red-faced, Jasmine unwavering. For a long breath, the world felt suspended, teetering on the edge of collapse. Jasmine's voice rose again, each word deliberate, each syllable echoing like a hammer striking steel. "You betrayed the farmers who lost their land. You betrayed the mothers who can't feed their children. You betrayed the veterans who bleed without care, the children denied therapy, the families burying loved ones from preventable diseases. You betrayed America the moment you chose power over people." The gallery erupted in sobs and cheers, reporters screaming into their recorders, flashes exploding like lightning across the chamber. Trump tried to shout back, his mouth opening, but nothing came. His rage was now weakness, his fire reduced to smoke. He pounded the desk again, red and broken, his voice drowned beneath the roar of the crowd. And Jasmine leaned forward, her final words dropping like a blade twisting into the wound. How will Trump fight back when he's already bleeding? The cliffhanger struck the chamber like a shockwave, leaving the nation breathless, waiting for the next blow. The chamber still quaked from Jasmine's thunderous accusation when a trembling voice rose from the gallery, cutting through the chaos sharper than any gavel. A mother stood, her face pale, her hands clutching to photographs, one of a thin bow, one of a frail girl. Her knees buckled as she tried to speak, but the words cracked, soaked in agony. "My son is hungry. My daughter is sick. Why are you killing us?" The words detonated like an explosion in slow motion. Lawmakers froze, their shouting silenced mid-breath, the roar collapsing into a haunting quiet. Cameras swiveled toward her, catching the tremor in her lips, the streak of tears carving down her cheeks. She collapsed to her knees, the photographs clutched to her chest as though holding her children close. Her sobs echoed through the chamber, raw and unfiltered, the sound of a broken heart that pierced the armor of politics. Reporters dropped their pens, even the hardened faces of politicians faltered, eyes shifting away in shame. The gallery stirred, farmers, veterans, parents, every one of them leaning toward her, as though her pain belonged to them too. The silence stretched heavy, unbearable, each sob dragging the chamber deeper into the abyss of heartbreak. Jasmine rose slowly, her eyes glassy, but her presence unshaken. She walked toward the gallery rail, her heels striking like drums in the silence. Her voice, soft but trembling with power, filled the room. "This mother is not an actor, she is not a prop, she is America. And her cry is the cry of millions." She extended a hand toward the woman, who clutched Jasmine's fingers as though they were the last solid thing in the world. Trump shifted uncomfortably, tugging at his tie, his face red, but this time not with fury, with something closer to fear. He muttered under his breath, "Pathetic, stage." But the microphones betrayed him, his words slipping across the airwaves to millions of horrified viewers. The chamber hissed in outrage, gasps cascading like thunderclaps, the cruelty of his dismissal colliding head-on with the mother's raw grief. Jasmine turned back toward him, fire returning to her eyes. "This is the cost of your cuts, Mr. Trump. It's not numbers on a page, it's a boy starving, a girl without care, a mother on her knees begging for mercy." Her voice rose, trembling with fury. "If you can look at her and still smirk, then you are not just unfit to lead, you are unfit to call yourself human." The chamber erupted in sobs, shouts, and applause, the emotional storm cresting into heartbreak and fury. Yet beneath the nose, the mother's sobs lingered, echoing louder than any cheer or insult. And across America, millions whispered the same question that now haunted the chamber. How many more families must break before justice answers? The mother's sobs still hung heavy in the air, her photographs clutched against her chest like a shield against despair, when Trump leaned forward, desperate to reclaim control. His mouth opened, his hand smacked the microphone, his voice cracked. This is stage, this is." But the words sputtered, breaking apart like fragments of a lie too fragile to stand. He coughed, licked his lips, tried again. Nothing came. The chamber froze, every eye locked on him, every camera trained like a sniper's lens. He shifted in his chair, tugged at his tie, his jaw clenched, but still no words. The silence swelled, louder than thunder, pressing down on the chamber like a suffocating weight. 10 seconds, 15, 20, each second etched into history. Reporters exchanged looks, their pens hovering above notepads, unable to move. In the gallery, the mother sobbed harder, her grief filling the void his voice should have filled. The contrast was unbearable, her raw pain against his mute indifference. 25 seconds, 30, the tension was so sharp it felt like the air itself might shatter. At 35 seconds, whispers broke out. Why isn't he saying anything? Is he frozen? The networks cut to split screens, Jasmine's unwavering stare, Trump's faltering silence, the mother weeping on the floor. Commentators in studios screamed into their earpieces, anchors clutching their notes, voices quivering as they narrated the collapse unfolding live. He has no words, he's frozen on national television. 40 seconds, the gallery erupted in gasps, some covering their mouths, others pointing, their disbelief spilling into shouts. Hashtags lit up in real time. Number 47 seconds, hashtag Trump silent, hashtag Crockett dominates. Twitter exploded, feeds racing faster than anchors could keep up. Millions of Americans sat forward on couches and bar stools, gripping phones and remotes, whispering as if in church, unwilling to break the spell of his silence. Jasmine did not move, she sat perfectly still, her eyes locked on him, her face carved in steel. The silence was her weapon, and she wielded it without lifting a finger. Trump's knuckles whitened as he gripped the table, his eyes darting wildly, his lips twitching, but no sound came. 45 seconds, 46, 47, the longest silence in modern political history, broadcast live to the entire nation. Finally, Trump slammed his fist down, shattering the unbearable pause, his face crimson, his voice hoarse as he tried to roar anything. But it was too late. The silence had spoken louder than any word. The chamber erupted, Democrats cheering, Republicans shouting, the gallery on its feet in disbelief. Commentators screamed into microphones, anchors gasped live on air, social media melted under the weight of millions of posts. And over it all, Jasmine leaned closer to her mic, her voice calm, sharp, devastating. America just watched the truth. When faced with the suffering of our people, Donald Trump had nothing to say. The roar of the chamber still pulsed from Trump's collapse into silence, but Jasmine did not bask in it. She rose slowly, deliberately, letting the noise crash around her like waves breaking against rock. Her hand pressed firmly on the table, her voice cutting through the storm, calm but lethal. This isn't politics, this is life and death. The words fell like a thunderclap, silencing the chaos. The gallery froze, lawmakers leaned forward, and anchors across America whispered the line again and again into their microphones. Life and death, not votes, not polls, the stakes were carved into human bodies, into graves, into hungry stomachs and hospital beds. Every mother, every father watching at home felt the weight of it in their chest. Trump tried to bluster, shaking his head, mouthing insults, but the cameras ignored him. They stayed fixed on Jasmine, who now commanded the chamber like a general standing victorious on the battlefield. She pointed to the gallery, her finger trembling with emotion, her voice rising. Every story told in this room is proof. A farmer broken, a veteran abandoned, a child denied therapy. A mother crying out as her children starve. These are not statistics, they are America. The room erupted in gasps, tears streaming down faces, the weight of her words pressing on every soul. She leaned closer to the microphone, her tone softening, intimate now, as if she were speaking directly into the hearts of those watching at home. If leaders won't act, then who will? If those in power choose silence, then who will rise for the powerless? Her words vibrated with urgency, a call not to Congress, but to the people themselves. Across the country, in living rooms, diners, and subway cars, Americans leaned forward, breath caught in their throats. The chamber shook with a storm of emotions, applause, tears, shouts of rage, but Jasmine's calm voice cut through it all, reverberating like a bell tolling across the nation. This isn't politics, this is survival. And as the cameras pulled tighter on her face, a single question scrolled across screens nationwide, capturing the moment as a hug for history. If leaders won't act, will the people rise? The chamber still throbbed with the echo of her rallying cry when Jasmine stepped away from the table, No longer facing Trump, no longer even facing Congress, she turned toward the cameras, her gaze piercing through the lens, reaching into every living room, every diner, every crowded subway car where Americans were watching. Her voice, steady yet heavy with the scars of battle, rose with solemn gravity. Justice isn't partisan, it's survival. And survival belongs to all Americans. The chamber hushed as if the walls themselves leaned in to listen. Republicans, Democrats, reporters, and citizens in the gallery all turned toward the cameras with her, as though compelled by the magnetism of her words. The images of farmers, veterans, mothers, and children still lingered in the air, haunting, undeniable. Jasmine's voice carried them like a hymn. You've heard the stories, you've seen the suffering. The betrayal wasn't against me or my party, it was against you, against us, against the people this government was sworn to protect. Her hand lifted slightly, trembling not with weakness, but with the weight of the moment. Survival does not ask whether you are red or blue. Hunger does not care if you're rural or urban. Disease does not stop at party lines. When justice dies, democracy dies with it. But when justice survives, America survives. Her tone softened, but her words struck with the force of prophecy. The gallery wept openly now, strangers embracing, veterans saluting, mothers clutching their children tighter. Even the cold lights of the chamber seemed warmer, refracting off the tears on Jasmine's face. She fought to hold her composure. She leaned in closer to the microphone, her voice almost a whisper, yet carried on every broadcast signal across the nation. Justice isn't partisan, it's survival. And survival belongs to all Americans. The silence that followed was not empty, it was holy, filled with the heartbeat of a nation reminded of its humanity. And across America, millions sat frozen before their screens, asking themselves if this was not just a hearing, but the rebirth of a fight for their very lives. The instant Jasmine's closing words faded, the chamber dissolved into a storm of voices, but the real earthquake was outside. Crowds had already swelled around the Capitol steps, their chants rolling like thunder across the night sky. Save our kids! Save our kids! They roared, fists raised, signs flashing under floodlights. Terrence held photographs of children, farmers lifted placards reading 55% bankrupt, veterans saluted with trembling hands, and mothers wept as their voices merged into one furious chorus. Helicopter cameras broadcast the scene live, panning over a sea of humanity that stretched for blocks. News anchors spoke breathlessly over the roar, struggling to capture the magnitude. On screens across America, hashtags erupted in real time. Hashtag Crockett vs. Trump surged to the top of global trends within minutes, joined by hashtag for 7 seconds and hashtag Save Our Kids. Millions tweeted, posted, live-streamed, their voices echoing Jasmine's words, amplifying them into a national reckoning. Inside newsrooms, commentators shouted over each other. This isn't just a hearing, it's a historic collapse. 330 million Americans were witnesses today. Networks replayed the silence, the testimonies, Jasmine's stare that froze Trump in place. Clip after clip went viral, the mother collapsing in tears, the child clutching her bear, the veteran holding his empty pill bottle. Each one became a symbol, seared into the conscience of a country. Outside the Capitol, the chants grew louder, almost shaking the marble steps. Protesters lit candles, holding them high like stars against the night, their glow flickering in the cameras as reporters pushed through the crowd. Some screamed in rage, others sobbed in grief, but all stood united under a single cry. Save our kids! The sound carried far beyond Washington, echoing through every phone and television, spilling into the streets of cities across America as spontaneous rallies ignited coast to coast. Back inside, Jasmine stood still amid the chaos, her face lit not just by the cameras, but by the weight of history. She did not raise her hands, she did not shout, she simply let the nation's roar fill the silence Trump had left behind. And as the narrator's voice closed over the footage of candles, chants, and hashtags burning across the globe, the words struck like a final verdict. 330 million Americans were witnesses today. The chants outside thundered through the marble walls as Jasmine stepped out of the chamber, the heavy doors swinging wide. Flashbulbs exploded, cameras swiveled, but she did not walk toward the reporters clawing for sound bites. Instead, she descended the Capitol steps straight into the crowd, where her people waited with faces streaked by tears, lit by the flicker of candles. The roar softened as she moved among them, every step turning a politician into something greater, a symbol. The first hand she reached for was rough, callous, the hand of a janitor still in his uniform, his eyes wet but unblinking. He whispered, "I cleaned these holes, but tonight you made them ours." Jasmine gripped his hand firmly, nodding with quiet reverence. A nurse stepped forward next, her scrub stained with the fatigue of endless shifts, a mask dangling from her neck. She clutched Jasmine's arm, sobbing, "We held their hands as they died because the system abandoned us. You spoke for them." Jasmine pulled her into a fierce embrace, the cameras capturing a moment no speech could rival. Then, through the throng, a veteran pushed forward on unsteady legs, metals clinking softly against his chest. He saluted, tears streaming down his face, his voice breaking, "I fought for America overseas. Tonight, you fought for us here at home." Jasmine's hand shook slightly as she returned the salute, her eyes brimming with tears. Around them, the crowd erupted not in chants this time, but in applause, raw and thunderous, a sound born of unity rather than rage. Jasmine turned back toward the cameras, her voice rising above the storm of clapping hands and pounding hearts. "What we did tonight wasn't about left or right, it was about right and wrong. If justice is silenced, democracy dies." She let the silence linger, her gaze piercing into the lens, as if staring into the eyes of every American watching. Her final words fell like a challenge, heavy and unforgettable. "Will you stand silent or rise with me?" The crowd erupted again, this time chanting her name, the sound swelling like a wave crashing against history. And as the screen faded to black, hashtags burned across timelines, comment sections flooded, and millions of Americans answered her call not with silence, but with their voices. This story is not just about politics, it's about the soul of humanity. Jasmine showed us that justice means feeding the hungry, healing the sick, and lifting up the forgotten. It is courage in the face of cruelty, truth against lies, hope against despair. In our own lives, we may not stand in Congress, but every day we face choices that echo this same truth. Will we defend the vulnerable, or will we stay silent? Democracy survives only when ordinary people dare to act. So I ask you, when the moment comes, will you rise? Thank you for watching until this moment and for standing with us on this journey for justice. Your support means everything. Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss what's next. And we'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below and let us know what moved you most in this story. Together, our voices make a difference.